This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you for coming out this evening to the 2040 Lancaster 2040 Conference of Planning Transportation Forum. Thanks for our friends here at Crossroads for letting us use the space this evening. It's very generous of them, and we certainly appreciate it. This evening's agenda will provide just a brief overview of the conference plan. Then we'll have our panelists give some presentations to each of their areas of expertise. Then we'll have a bit of a moderated discussion and an opportunity for audience questions. We'll talk a little bit more about where we're headed with the conference plan after tonight. So the Lancaster 2040 Conference Plan, Lancaster County, of course, is the lead agency on that. I'm with Benchmark Planning. We're a consulting firm out of Charlotte. We're the lead consultant on that. We do have some of our consulting partners here this evening as well. We have Team Horn Associates working with us, as well as Whitesmith Planning Law Group and Greenfield Development. The purpose of the Lancaster 2040 Conference Plan is, one of the things, to comply with the South County Conference Planning Enablement Act, which requires that municipal government that regulate land use have to have an updated conference plan at least every 10 years, updated with interim 5-year updates. The conference plan establishes a long-range vision for the future of the community. It guides land use development, capital investments, things like water, sewer infrastructure, roads, parks and recreation facilities, schools. And in Lancaster County, we have a particular focus for this plan on growth management, transportation, loss of agriculture and other rural lands, natural resource extraction, recreation, open space, economic development, community beautification. And one of the things that's unique about Lancaster County is, in this planning effort, is that given the size of the county and the very different nature of the different areas of the county, we're actually doing 3 small area plans essentially as part of a larger Lancaster County 2040 planning effort. And so the Panhandle, where we are now, greater Lancaster area, around the city of Lancaster and the areas east of there, and southern Lancaster, where the rural areas, with the gold mine, Kershaw, and county experience, we'll have a separate plan as well, all culminated in a larger consolidated conference plan for the county as a whole. The project timeline, we've been kicked this off about a year ago, back in November 2021, completed background research in March of this year, and then in September we began working on these key topic forms. We've had 3 so far. This is the last in the series. We'll be working on the area plans of the fall, the winter, preparing the overall conference plan, hopefully have this done by July next year. So this is the last in the series of key topic forums. Previously, beginning on September 8th, we talked about agriculture and natural resources, economic development, land use and growth management, and transportation. The recordings of each of those previous meetings are already on our website. A couple of them are on the Facebook page as well. We have a website we'll show it to you at the end of the meeting. And this one, the recording that we're making tonight will be posted on the website as well. So if your friends weren't able to make it this evening, you can go to the website so that they can check it out. Tonight's panelists, we have a great panel. As I mentioned, Jonathan Guy, an engineer with Kimley Horn. I guess I'm Charleston now. He's got a Jonathan's very familiar with this area and all work around here. He is a Kimley Horn is a sub-consultant to us on this project. We have David Hoover, who's administrator for Rockville Fort Mill Area Transportation City, and it's RFATS, the Transportation Planning Organization for the urbanized area the Panhandle is part of. We have Machael Peterson, who's the Director of Planning with the South County Department of Transportation, and Christina Lewis, who is the Statewide Planning Chief for the South County Department of Transportation. And without further ado, we will begin this evening's presentation with Mr. Guy.
Thank you. I like to walk around and talk. Makes it easier. Plus it's interactive. So thank you for coming out tonight and talking about something that is important to all of us, important to you because you're here. Transportation, right? So raise your hand for traffic engineering in this room. Well, we're going to driver's license, and that means you're a traffic engineer. So I'm glad you're here to help us plan for the future. Just providing a little help for tonight. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. I'm going to start the presentations off. I'm going to talk about some of the work that we've been doing for the comprehensive plan. So far, we've gathered a lot of data. You're going to see a couple of maps here at the beginning. I'm going to go into some safety data. The maps in the beginning are just the base for what we will be doing as we begin to develop plans and make recommendations on intersections and street connectivity and things like that. That'll come at a later date, but you'll begin to see and familiarize yourself with what the plans are beginning to look like. When we get to the safety analysis, so talking about crash data, that's what's really important to pay attention to tonight. That's the foundation. A lot of people think that it begins with just traffic volumes and what we're doing with that information, but it also starts with understanding where we're having accident patterns. And as Ron mentioned, there's 3 distinct areas that we're looking at. Each of those context areas are completely different. You think about the Panhandle where we are tonight, the urbanization that's occurred here. Paul mentioned that I'm not a Charleston man. I actually used to live 25 years up here in Fort Mill, so I'm very familiar with this area. I understand the patterns. I remember when there was not a lot of development. I remember when there was no building that we're in tonight here. I remember what 521 was like. It was actually interesting in talking with one of the district administrators with the district SCDOT, and he was talking about 521 because 13 years ago, the county in partnership with SCDOT put together a plan for 521, and I remember having an interview with him and talking about that project. And he said, we were crazy. Everybody was saying, what in the world are we doing? Why in the world are we spending SCDOT's dollars to widen 521 when North Carolina, it's a 2-lane road? It's actually pretty smart. We actually need to widen it now and make more improvements to it as well. And I see a lot of shaking heads. So we're going to talk about some of those things. We're going to talk about how that begins. But again, I'm here to talk about the foundation of the study, what we're going to do from a transportation standpoint. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of slides you're going to see. These slides are really just functional classification. They're really hard to see on the screen because it's so far away. But really we use this information to understand the classification, what the roads look like, collector streets, overall arterial, major thoroughfares. Begin thinking about what your road is. The Lancaster County Panhandle is very unique in the sense that you have essentially one main artery that brings you in, brings you out, and then you have feeders that cut across. You have individuals who don't even live in the state who use those roads to cut across and to get back around. The thing I tell individuals wherever I'm practicing, traffic is just like water. It goes and takes a path of least resistance, and so it's going to cut across the network as easy as it can be. So we use this information to begin to build our model network as we're looking at this. And so just looking through a couple of these, each of these are broken out by each of the subject areas, the Panhandle, the greater Lancaster areas, and getting down into the heart of Lancaster County where it begins to open up, and of course southern Lancaster as you get down towards where the old mine is, and then connecting even further south from there. Both of these, or all 3 of these areas, are extremely different and unique in how they are connected, how they operate, and how they interact with each other. And so it's important for us to understand that foundation and how they're connected. Likewise, as we begin to think about potential collector streets, and this is something that RFATS and our next speaker, David, is going to talk a little bit more about RFATS and what that does. We put together a plan back in 2017 that looked at collector streets. We'll also be looking at that and providing new recommendations for potential collectors. From 2017 to where we are in 2022, almost 2023, a lot of development has occurred. So some of these streets have been built in, some of them have. But we'll be making recommendations for possible modifications and possible additions to that. Also important for us to begin to think about is looking at the bicycle and pedestrian network, right? It's great to have that not only from a recreation standpoint, but if we could take a few more cars off the street, that would be a fantastic thing. Free up some congestion, maybe get kids to school in a different manner than just driving. So we'll start to look at this as well. This is the existing network that's out there. You can see this from a Panhandle standpoint. And then we will look at the rest of the network as well and how that connects into the greater regional plans that are out there, both Union County to the north of Mecklenburg, and of course over York County as well, because just like traffic, we want to make sure we have an integrated and connected network. So I talked about the safety analysis and the importance of that. And so as we look at this, you're going to see some pretty shocking numbers as we start to look at this. So looking at Lancaster County, we had almost, so from 2017 up to 2022, we had 9,000 crashes that occurred within the county. That's a lot of crashes over a 5-year period when you think about it. Now, we're talking about an entire county, but 90,000 crashes. And you can see it's been on the rise as we look, starting in 2017, 1772, 1793, 1835, and then we get the pandemic in 2020, and it drops. It's a good thing. But look what happens in 2021. We see that come back, we see it come back even higher, over 200 more crashes occurred on your street network here than previously did. So 2020 is an anomaly in the sense everybody understands that from a traffic standpoint and from a crime standpoint. But we see a nice projected trend line, and it's not going the right way. So when I talk about safety, you understand why this is important, why these numbers are important as we begin to make recommendations. We will look at the high frequency, we will look at the proximity of these, we begin to make recommendations, things to make traffic safer. If we make traffic safer, the benefit of that is that you actually get traffic that moves better as well, right? You all remember just coming in, as I was coming on 77 and I was getting ready to get on the 417 bypass, I turned on 21 and right there, state trooper pulled somebody over, or get an incident right there. And so it's every single day. Every time there's an incident, that backs traffic up. So that's what we want to avoid. If you look to the far right of the screen over there, you can see that's what's known as a frequency map or a hotspot. And you can see where the hotspots are. It's up there. You can see where when 60 comes in, it's B 521, and then all the way down through the panhandle, you see that nice bright yellow color. That's where your incidents are occurring. You come further down, you see right into the central part of Lancaster County, you see those incidents occurring there as well. And then we have some that are inside the incorporated limits of the towns as we come further to 521. Not surprising. And then we have some areas that are popping out. So let's break this down a little bit. I said there was a lot of fatalities, and you can see there in Lancaster County we have 78 fatalities. Each year is about 17 across the board. Even during the pandemic, we had 17 fatalities. Not a number to be proud of, not a number that you want to go celebrate. As you look at this, and we use the scale, KABCO, you can see what each of those stands for just to the right of that. Fatality, incapacitated injury, non-incapacitated injury, possible injury, and then no injury. All right, the thing that's important is to understand each of these because it talks about severity, but as you look at the numbers, the 6631, which is the very bottom number, those are what we like to refer to as property damage only, right? So no one is injured, you bump the cars up, you hit the cars. That tells us that the majority of these, we're not having injuries, which is a good thing. Traditionally, those are low speed. They're traditionally going to either be a side swipe or going to be a rear end collision because of congestion. We have all those details and we can continue to share that, but that's at least a little positive. It's not a flip reverse. The map in the middle shows the locations of the fatalities from 2017 to 2021. There's a handful, and I'll talk about it in the panhandle. The majority are focused in and around the central part, and then there's a few down the southern part as well. So let's dive in and kind of look at this. In the panhandle, 11 fatalities, and at the very bottom, you can see the sun there in the middle, but at the bottom, 24, 27, as far as no injuries. 16% resulted in an injury or a fatality. As we look at the crashes here, concentration, around 160 and 521. Not surprising, especially when you look at the traffic volumes up there. You've all driven through that area, that really tight section of 521 between 160 and Market Road. You know what that's like? It's a big L Z-shape through here. A lot of congestion. We were just talking about that, David and I, when we started the meeting. So this is a little more information on this as we start to think through this. Over half of all the panhandle crashes are on 521. Does that shock anybody? It shocked me. 85% were non-injury, and then less than 1%, so 23% was fatalities. You can see those key locations. We kind of indicated where they are with that concentration. Charlotte Highway and Fort Mill Highway. No surprise. Where you got concentration of people, meaning volume, you're going to have incidents, you're going to have people running into individuals there, unfortunately. That's just how that works. We also wanted to look at the bicycle and pedestrian crashes. We had 7 that involved a bicycle and 9 that involved pedestrian. You can see those locations there. There's not a real good concentration of where those are. Sometimes we look for, is there a spot location where this is going to be? They're actually split across and throughout the network. The commonality is that it must be in along 541. Not surprised, I remember I had a lot of friends who used to ride the bikes before too much development was out here on 521, so they would come down through here and cut across to get into Union County or continue riding further south. So not surprised to see those occur in these locations. As we look at Greater Lancaster, this did surprise me. So 51 crashes or 51 fatalities in Greater Lancaster. If I was going to be projecting where I thought we would see the most of those, I would have thought it would have been in here, just because the volumes are higher there. But what we're seeing here, we've got 51, we've got 33, 55, so actually it is a much larger area. We've got more concentration of pedestrians, with crashes in these locations across that spectrum in the middle part there. Key intersections, you can see not any that really kind of jump out. All of those are about the same. Maybe Page on Highway has got the highest concentration. Highway 9 bypass east and west. And that makes sense. If you're starting to think about the major roadways, the connectivity of that, where those are, those are the locations of that. A whole lot more pedestrian and bicycle crashes. Now, given the urban network that is there in Lancaster County, in the city itself, not surprisingly, there's more pedestrians there. 14 crashes involved. A higher number that are more severe than what we saw in Panhandle. 39 crashes involving pedestrian. In those locations, you can see those are actually more clustered along Airport Road, McElwain Road, and the Great Falls Highway kind of connecting in through there. So that is a cluster that we look at and make some recommendations. And then as we look at Southern Lancaster, 16 total fatalities there, 849 property damage only. And as you can read there, of the approximately 1,200 crashes, 29% resulted in an injury or fatality, which is slightly higher than what we see, slightly higher than the 25%. So when you get into the more rural areas like we see in Southern Lancaster, it's not surprising that you start to see some of those injury severities creep up because you have a higher speed, and the speed that also increases the severity of that. So interesting to see the breakdown as you compare each of these 3 distinct areas from that standpoint. And then, of course, talking about where those locations are, Flat Creek Road, and then, of course, Kershaw Camden Highway being the most, or has the most, and not surprisingly, as you start to come down, gold lines running down through there, running down Kershaw County, that's going to be the primary route that's going to connect you in that area. It's going to concentrate and look at traffic volumes through there. Another one that kind of jumped out is creeping up there is the Fort Hill Road, and then of course McElwain Road popping up there as well. Not as high those Kershaw being 20%. They're starting to collect up there, so those are some things we're going to want to look at. 20% of the total crashes occurred there, as I said, on Camden Highway, and you can see those percentages at the top as well. Bike ahead, not surprisingly, much less in this area. It's much more rural. It's harder to get between places with a bicycle or walking. So we had 2. Severity was much less, as well as pedestrians much less as far as the injuries there as well. So, which is positive. One interesting thing though is you read in the very top right-hand corner, 4 of the 9 pedestrian bicycle crashes occurred at night. And unfortunately, that's what we do see. You think about the area, we don't have a lot of lighting in that area. If you are dependent upon a bicycle or your feet to move around, you're going to see a higher propensity because you're going to either. And it saddens me to see this as much education out there about individuals walking, especially in a rural area. We're supposed to walk with traffic. Wear clothing that can be seen. Because if you're a pedestrian, you can see a car coming much further than a car can see you. But unfortunately, you have a lot of people that tend to walk with traffic. And I know that's something that SCDOT through the pedestrian and obstacle safety action plan, that's something that we know throughout the state as an issue to address, and we're working hard to address that, dealing with the rural pedestrian and bicycle practices. So, with that, thank you for my time that you've given me. I'll turn it over to Mr. Cooper to continue our conversations.
For those who don't know me, my name is David Hoover. I'm the administrator of the Rockdale Fort Area Transportation Study, referred to as RFATS. And well, tonight we're here as part of the County Conference Plan Update. Also wanted to let you know that there's some other folks that are involved in the planning process beyond those you see at the county level. One of those is an agency like RFATS. I'm going to get a little back if I can. You know, when an area becomes urbanized, it reaches a certain population threshold, in this case 50,000 or greater. Washington basically says, before you can spend federal money in this area, you better establish a special purpose public agency known as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Have you ever heard of that term before, or is this first time you're hearing it? RFATS has been around for about 50 years. Up on the screen, I've got our existing planning area. We've got a population of about 280,000 and growing. We're the only designated maintenance area in the state for air quality, which means we violate one or more of the air quality standards. In this case, we're at the lows of them. So that's very, very practical implications to us. What it means is, before we can go out and widen the road, we've got to demonstrate to Washington that we're not going to inadvertently make matters worse by widening the road, but that it's part of an overall strategy to improve operating conditions. And just feel free to stop me if you have any questions as we're going through this. I know it's not something you see every day, and certainly want to respond to anything that comes up. Now, you know, the definition is always helpful. And I think I want to touch on what an NPO is. But again, a good way to think of it is you've got a decision-making body. It's going to look at all the individual decisions that cities, counties make, and say, what does that mean operationally? And then we're going to basically look at how best to make infrastructure improvement. So it makes good, rational, operational sense. And that's what RFATS is. And the Panhandle is included in RFATS. So in addition to your own planning work, the work you see from the staff at Lancaster County, there's another layer of planning that goes on as well. Now, I wanted to just kind of give you a sense of the three key work products. Good way to think of this is, you know, you've got the long-range plan. This is the vision document. This is where we're at. We're going to look out over 20 to 25 years and say, where do we want to be? That next one, the Transportation Improvement Program, is when you've got a project idea and you've got money. This is when it becomes real. So you look at about over the next 2 to 6 years. And then we've got that last requirement, transportation conformity. This surprises a lot of people. This means we've got to do the modeling process that we do with our partners up in Charlotte, where we'll look at all the changes in the road network, 2 to 3 lanes, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, that kind of thing, and say, when we put it all together, what's the aggregate level of vehicular emissions? And are we doing things the right way? And that's the threshold. If you don't meet that, you will not get clearance to put any other money to work for transportation improvements. Now, I want to focus just on the long-range transportation plan. You know, a good way to think of this is not a study that sits on the shelf. This is a living document. This is something that's got to be updated at least every 4 years. It's got to look out over at least 20 years. You've got to use the latest planning data and assumptions. And that's very, very important here at Panhandle, because how rapidly things are changing. And then, of course, it's got to function as an integrated system. Those who are old enough to remember the old bridge to nowhere in Alaska, Washington's going to make sure there's none of that going on. And then in the end, you'll see a term up there, fiscally constrained. What that means is, don't just give us a wish list, as if money was no object. It's got to be grounded. Here are the needs, this is how much money we actually have available. So every year, given how fast we're changing, RFATS goes out and meets with all the planning directors. And we say, what's changed in terms of population, employment? And we'll look at a variety of different things. Approved subdivisions, new school locations, development agreements where we think it's going to result in something actually being done in the near term. And we'll take all that together, and then we'll kind of plot that out. And I want to give an example of the latest information that came in, and where we see changes in the entire RFATS planning area. And up on the screen, where you see green, is where you see the greatest degree of percentage change in the planning area. This should not be a surprise to anyone. What is interesting is that we often hear about growth in the larger metropolitan region, or the greater Charlotte area. If I told you that Panhandle had the highest percentage growth change over the last 10 years of your history, would that surprise you? If I told you it is projected to grow at 90% or more over the next 10 years, would that surprise you? That's what we're looking at. You are growing faster than anyone else within the RFATS planning area. Now, that's population. Here's employment. You see a little bit of a shift, still concentrated here in Panhandle. We've all heard the phrase, businesses follow rooftops. Where the growth is, so the businesses want to be. But I just want to give you a snapshot of what we're seeing, what's being sent back to us, and what informs our process. Sometimes I hear from folks who say, I didn't realize anyone was doing this. It's putting this together. This is being done every single year to make sure we've got the latest information, and this is available for you to look at, review, ask questions about. Feel free to call me anytime you want. Just by visiting the RFATS website. That kind of brings us back to the 521 corridor. In addition to being a part of the panel discussion tonight, we're actually working on a study to evaluate capacity alternatives along 521 right now. And I want to kind of share with you what's emerging as workable alternatives for widening this corridor. What's the best way to do it? I think you heard Jonathan say, this is the corridor. This is the central transmission belt for mobility in the county. We've got to get this right. We get one chance to go from 4 to 6 lanes. So we're looking at a lot of things. We're looking up from the state line down, all the way to Waxhaw Highway. I don't know how many people know, but our friends in North Carolina, they changed a long-standing position about being averse to widening 521 from the state line going north. For a long time, they didn't want to do that, and then made the decision to go widen from the state line. I believe it's up to Valentine's Common Parkway. So that's coming. And if we don't get ourselves realigned along 521, and we continue to see traffic continue on Marvin, it's going to get even more challenging. So we wanted to go down the corridor and say, let's look at how we can add capacity, taking account of safety, operating efficiency or reliability, mobility, right-of-way, and of course, those road protections. Now, when we get into evaluation and assessment, and this is the way we kind of think of it, we're looking at safety. You know, when we're building a community, we're going through a growth phase, and at some point, believe it or not, this phase will end. And we're all going to be left looking around saying, what have we built? We don't want to build a community where we can't be safe. That adversity impacts your quality of life, and that will work. We're going to look at local access and regional ability. As Jonathan said, it's a transportation network. Drivers in one area don't stay in one area. They move around. We want to minimize the impacts wherever we can. That's always a priority. We want to make sure we're accommodating future growth, looking at multimodal access, and of course, there's an important parallel inside streets. Now, there are three alternatives that have emerged right now. The first one probably shouldn't surprise anyone. You know, this is the traditional widening. You've got 4 lanes, you go out to 6. That's one approach, and that MD is median divided. Another one is the 6-lane median divided, which is what we call a super street. This is where you reconfigure how traffic flows to get more efficiency and more safety. But if you bend any of the divergent diamonds along Goldville Road or others, it takes a little while to adjust to it. And then the other is a hybrid configuration of those two approaches, because along Route 21 there are points where it narrows. So you may do a certain type of configuration and say in the public right of way and get to another point where now you're on someone's property. And it changes the dynamics. So the idea is, could you have a traditional orientation at certain points where it works, and then go to the other approach and then make that work along the corridor? We're trying to think as expansively as we can here. So I want to give you just one example. I'm going to talk about 160 and 521. Here's what a traditional widening looks like. This is what we're looking at right now. That's a busy intersection, isn't it? We're going to be sharing this with our policy committee for the first time at the next meeting here in November, looking at what this will accomplish, the expected life, the useful benefit of this kind of widening, expected impacts to safety, but also recognizing, we're all familiar with that phrase, if you build it, they will come. Well, if you widen it may seem counterintuitive, it may actually cause more folks to want to come to your area. So there is that element, unfortunately, as well. Now, here's the super street concept. This may look odd to you. This is where you're eliminating the ability to make a left turn off 521. You're having people come out, make a right, go a little down the road, come in to the center, wait, and then do a U-turn and go back the other way. And at that level, most people say, this seems like it's going to take more time. And actually, you'll move faster here, and when you begin to run out of right of way, it'll actually be about 20% more operating capacity. So it can work, it does work, but you have to think very clearly about whether you've got the right locations and the right conditions. One of the things we're focused on here is, given the limited number of side streets, how is this type of configuration going to affect them? You've got Possum Hall on the west, Marvin over here, Henry Harris going south. You don't have a lot of alternatives. So how do we widen the corridor? It's not just the corridor. You're going to affect the adjacent roadways. And so we need to make sure, particularly at Marvin, that we've got something that's going to move with enough efficiency. Otherwise, those folks coming from North Carolina and Henry Harris, they can't move now most of the time. So we don't want to make matters worse. This is what it looks like if you reconfigure the road this way. It's something you're beginning to see more and more. You travel, like just from South Carolina to North Carolina, you're beginning to see what I'll call innovative approaches. Diverging diamonds, directional interchanges, R-cuts. You might say, why is that? And it's not really complicated. It's because the traditional approaches won't move the needle to make enough of a benefit to expend the money. Because the intensity of the growth, 90% last decade, 90% this decade, that's not normal. That's a robust development environment. And so we need to think expansively how we approach these challenges, and we're doing that in RFATS. And I want to share some of this with you and try to answer any questions you have about what you're seeing on the screen. I'm going to go down a little further. Of course, I talked earlier about the hybrid configuration. I've taken the benefits of both approaches, seeing if we can put those together where it makes sense to minimize impacts along the way, and possibly consider going in that direction. Now, next steps, again, we're going to share this with our elected officials here in November. We'll work in the early Q1 of next year before we get a lot closer to resulting cost estimates. And then once we do that, we'll take account of when we can budget money, and go ahead and see if we can get this on the project schedule. One of the things we're also trying to coordinate is that given a lot of you may have read in the news, the budgetary challenges in North Carolina and SCDOT, they've got a lot of projects on hold. So we're trying to do our work in a way that will be the most compatible with what they're doing, so we can minimize disruption, or at least try to isolate it so it's occurring once and not twice, if at all possible. And then, of course, we have to meet those planning requirements. Remember I said earlier, we've got transportation conformity. So even if you've got the money, and you've got the need, and the politics are right, you still have to run it through that model to see not just what we're doing on 521, but what your county's doing, what the folks in Mecklenburg are doing, that new bridge they want to put over in Gaston, New South Hill Road, or I-45 is on the short about this. You put all that together, and you run the model and say, are we under the aggregate level of vehicular emissions that the EPA is looking for us to meet? If you pass that test and all the other things, then you get the clearance to go forward. So we've got a few steps ahead of us, but one that has covered some of those tonight as part of your comp plan process. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Anyone that has that now, or I'll later on the session. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Given the ability of people to work remotely, how much are you factoring that into all of your planning?
Excellent question. It's one of the things that most planning agencies are struggling with right now. Because COVID went on so long, longer than many other experiences, we're trying to gauge how deep is it going to take. Are employers going to be comfortable allowing more employees to work from home and feel like they're getting a good day's work? Is it going to stay with us? And what percentage of the community population is it represented? I don't know that we have answers to that yet. I hear arguments on both sides that say, yes, I can see for discretionary employees, accountants, some attorneys, insurance folks might be able to work remotely and make it work and make it make sense. But there are others who say, I need my folks on the floor. That's when I get maximum output. And so there's a little bit of both. It's something we are monitoring. We do expect to see a real impact, but it's still an evolving story at this point. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hey, it's John Delphos. And it's probably a good time to talk about it or ask a question. We're going to wait to the end, but since you just discussed some of the plans here. And I'm very glad to see, because as a member of the CTC in Lancaster County, I represent District 1, and the CTC has made a recommendation that the planning committee, or, of Lancaster work with SCDOT and RFATS to come together with a plan. This comprehensive plan seems to be that answer, and I'm glad to see you're all working together. What I see missing from some of your concepts, and I think you'll know where I'm going, you've known me for a while. I'm not really sure that widening the road is necessary. I think we've got a lot of tarmac out there. The issue is the intersections. And I know some of those things may alleviate them, but for a long, long time now, I've been a big proponent of roundabouts. And, the number one issue the SCDOT says they have is safety. Roundabouts reduce the safety. Talk about cost. Rather than going to 6 lanes, you don't have all those right-of-ways going out of line, only deal with the intersections. And, John, I think you gave me a new one, that, you said, build it and it'll come, and you were talking about resistance, okay? And you build more road, there'll be less resistance, and I think just more traffic. So I think roundabouts at intersections would be a way of actually building that resistance so people don't want to drive through here. Maybe trucks shouldn't come through the Panhandle. Maybe they should take Route 5 and get over to 77. So anyway, I want to tell you a little story because it happened at RFATS probably 5-7 years ago. It seems like 15 years ago. And there was a discussion about the intersection of 521 and Marvin Road. And the guy who did the research stood up there and said, I don't know if we do 1 turn lane, 2 lane, or 3 turn lanes. It's going to cost a lot, and it won't solve the problem. So I went up after the meeting and I said, is there a reason you didn't consider roundabouts? And he said they didn't ask me to. So I am here to ask you to please, for all the reasons I expressed here, consider roundabouts as a possible solution to this problem.
I hear the point you're making, and on one level, I hear you, and I agree with the increased safety outcome of roundabouts. However, generally you see them where the volume on the corridor is much lower, and the general speed level is also lower, so that you get increased vehicular safety as well as pedestrian movement safety on a fast-moving corridor. If the intent is to truly fundamentally alter the nature of what's out here, that would probably be the result, even if you get clearance. I don't think you're going to get that given the nature of the road and what it's designed to accomplish in the network, but I do hear you.
I guess my question was, will somebody please consider that, or will this group consider that? I mean, really, you could slow down the speed. It would slow down the speed, reduce, the congestion. Right, send them off somewhere else. I've seen it work. I lived in London for 3 years, and I don't understand why it's not being used.
I will make this promise to you. I'll follow up with the consultant team doing the work, and we'll look at it and see whether it's feasible for the board. Fair?
I'll echo John's comments, and since we have some people from the state here, I'm sure you're familiar with Hilton Head Island, and they have a lot of roundabouts, including Sea Pine Circle. Granted that the speed is a little lower at the 5.1, but there's a lot of traffic, and that moves pretty quickly through there. Now, I can't speak to how many accidents there are. I'm sure somebody at the state knows that. But that's an example of a very heavy traffic corridor that the traffic moves pretty well.
There are engineering firms that specialize in this kind of study, and I'd like to see us pay for that kind of study. Anyway.
John, thank you. Everyone, I don't want to interrupt their established schedules, so what I will do is I will stay after your response to the questions if we aren't able to address those during the Q&A session in just a moment. Thank you all very much.
Okay, can you? Good evening, I'm Christina Lewis, I'm the statewide.
Speak up.
Okay, thank you. I'm the statewide planning chief for Department of Transportation, and they did such an excellent job of explaining the NPO was not going to very quickly. So they in Office of Planning. So we have strategic planning reporting, which has all of our plans. The strategic plan, the statewide transportation improvement program. We have the statewide long-range transportation plan, which is the we call the AICP. And then we also have Office for System Performance Management. So those are all really smart people that do traffic projections. Statewide planning, which is what I do, and I'll go into that a little bit further. And we have a new office for regional mobility, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So our office is responsible for managing MPS costs and making sure that they comply with all the federal and state regulations, the system, and project selection, evaluation, any of their studies. We just basically serve as an extension to their staff. So South Carolina has 11 MPOs and 10 COGs. And the COGs are responsible for the rural transportation planning. So most of Lancaster County is within the COG, but of course the Panhandle lies within the RFATS MPO. So the planning process includes, of course, as David said, the 20-year long-range transportation plan, which would have to be updated every 5 years on most areas, but with RFATS in the maintenance area, they have to update their plan every 4 years. Within the long-range transportation plan, as David said, he has to look at the transportation needs of the area, socioeconomic, he has to choose the projects, produce a travel demand model, and then prioritize all of the projects. So, was it 2017, Michelle, when they passed Act 114? And so we ran all the projects based on financial viability, of course, public safety is a factor, economic development, traffic volume, truck traffic, pavement quality, environmental impact, and also land use plans, which is going to come into play. We're going to talk more about regional mobility. So once the long-range transportation plan is produced and they have a prioritized list of projects, then they can start moving those projects into their transportation improvement program, which is where the projects become funded and they become actual projects with a schedule. Preliminary engineering, which is where the projects get designed, right away, the right away needs to be acquired, and then the construction process. And once the projects get moved into the MPO's conversions, then they have to be included into the statewide transportation improvement program, which is a listing of all projects that have federal funding and also any regional significant projects. So the Regional Mobility Program is a new program that we're currently developing. It's rebranding of the MPO COG program, or guide share, which is another term that we use for the funding that the state provides to the MPOs COGs for their transportation planning. So in October of 2021, our commission voted to increase the funding to the MPOs COGs by $100 million. So it went from $138 million a year to $238 million a year, which we're phasing in over 4 years. So far we've increased the fund to the MPOs COGs by $50 million approximately, focusing on improving the multimodal ability to accomplish performance measures. So this process, the most important aspect, is going to be a data-driven process with quantifiable success. Are there any questions for me? Yes.
Can you explain how the growth that gentleman is developing and presenting and planning for gets resources allocated out of your office, and how expensive is it to build a mile of road?
The RFATS gets funding, I don't know how is it $7 million a year. I don't have that chart in front of me.
Right, it's about 7,747, if memory serves.
Yeah, so he has that funding, and then, he mentioned earlier that their, transportation group currently has to do facility constraints, so that's when they make the decision which projects, are highest priority and which projects, can they actually fund. So,
It has nothing to do with growth, though. How is the money allocated throughout South Carolina?
the MPO funding is allocated based on population.
If I may, if I understand your question correctly, sir, the outcome from the modeling process does inform the decision-making process. That is, when we're looking at all the changes in population and employment within the RFATS area, for example, that's going to, and we operationalize that and say, show us what it means operationally. We have to program projects that are consistent with those outputs. So we don't have an individual person pursuing a project that isn't objectively warranted. And once we make those decisions at the end level, that's cross-checked by the professionals at SCDOT and the Federal Highway Administration to make sure that the process has been done correctly, transparently, and it's objectively validated. Now, we have our own unique model in the RFATS area because we're the state's only designated maintenance area. I would assume that at the state level, they have a model for the remainder of the state that Dr. Zee oversees, and you would apply a similar process at the state level.
Yeah, but the question I have is, you measure the ozone from people being in a traffic jam versus what's being broadcast at 50 miles an hour in Gaston County, and compare those two, and how much mileage does $7 million bill?
Well, that's
You've got an intersection at 160 that I understand is going to take $5 million more than that, right?
well, you've got a couple of things that are kind of built in there, so I want to gloss over those, however, importantly. One, with the supply chain issue and inflation, you've got some price increases out there that I don't think are permanent, but they're very real right now. The other is, whenever there's a lot of federal money coming out of Washington, whether it's the infrastructure bill or any others, the consultants out there, the construction firms, they take note of that. And they can tend to push up pricing based upon demand and meet all the needs in the area that's growing. And we have to balance that and make sure it doesn't get out of hand. So we're going to do our own internal estimate of what a reasonable cost will be, and we'll keep reviewing the project until we get to a reasonable range of public and fair value for its dollars. So we're not just going to go out there and respond to market forces uncritically.
How many miles of road have you built?
We're going to take some additional audience questions in just a few minutes, but there will be an opportunity. If you would advance this slide. All right. So we did have some prepared questions for the panelists this evening. I'm sure you will have plenty of time for you all to ask additional questions. When we do get to that point of asking questions, you know, just for our audio recording of the meeting, if you would come down to the microphone, please make sure that we are picking up everything. So also, everyone else here in the room can hear you and your question as well. I will kick off with John, will probably ask these as well, and I'll go ahead with the first one. This is for everyone, and I'm going to add a little bit to it. What do you see as the most critical challenge facing mobility in the Lancaster County RFATS area over the next 2 years? And tag that, what trends or changes do you see that might be affecting what challenges might be in the future in terms of what are emerging trends that might affect as well?
Thank you. In our urban areas, I'm sorry. In our urban areas, we do need to balance economic growth via new expanded businesses, development, and so forth, because that's what we're hearing across the state. There is certainly an interest and a focus on economic growth in many of our counties across the state. And with the appropriate access management policies, that allows for transportation networks to work efficiently. At DOT, that's what we're seeing, as we are a proponent of growth, but just with the constraints that we've had in funding over the last several years, we can't keep up with the growth. And that's why it's so important, this collaboration that we have with our MPOs and their member jurisdictions. And so with that, that's one of the critical things that's facing us over the next 20 years, in addition to the cost escalation and the uncertainty of projects and what we can deliver with the finite funds that we do have.
I probably answer your question this way. The most pressing and critical challenges, reliability of the transportation network. You'll notice I use a very specific term, reliability. That doesn't mean uncongested. It means you've got enough predictability in the transportation system that you can plan your everyday needs, destinations, time you leave, when you're going to get back, so that basically it makes sense. We recently had a representative from the Texas Transportation Institute out here, and for those who don't know that, I wouldn't expect you to, they're kind of like Goldman Sachs, the transportation community. And someone asked them the question, said, what one thing can we do to make the congestion go away? And I think there was the climate quote, Julius Caesar, the die is cast. You're not going to make the area uncongested. You can make it manageable. You can adjust rider behavior, but the most important thing you can do along with safety is reliability of the network so that people can plan their days. That's being able to maintain that reliability is going to be critical. The other thing I think is going to be essential is that we have a range of options for mobility. That we cannot plan on the assumption that every single trip on an individual basis can be realized with the person being in their own car. We will have parking lots on major corridors if we think that way. We're going to have a transportation system that serves all users of the system. That's multimodal. It's a term we often use. And what that means is some people are in cars, some people are on trails, some people are on bicycles, some people are walking. You need it all to have that integrated over time, and that's going to directly correlate back to reliability as well as meeting everyone's needs.
Next question, I think we've heard some people discuss this before the presentation started this evening. This ties into that. A large development project or traffic impact studies identify road improvements necessary to mitigate the project's impact on the road system. Why is traffic congestion substantially increasing in Lancaster County despite having these improvements made by the developed community? Anybody want to take that? Maybe John.
Sure, it's a great question. I think what you're seeing is that you're seeing projects, you're seeing a popular place to live. When you have a popular place, you're going to have some congestion associated with that. And what happens over time is that these improvements come in, and it's a compounding effect. And so the improvements will go in, more development occurs, their improvements come in. Oftentimes, though, what you're seeing is not necessarily the association with just those developments that are causing congestion. There's been a trend that has really come to light as we start to look at impacts and what is known as the elongation of peak hours. We're seeing the AM peak hour continue to extend. We're seeing the midday peak hour actually in many places become the worst peak hour. Why? Because you got a balancing. For a long time, what you saw here was a steady stream north, steady stream south in the afternoon or evening. What's compounded that is that, and this question was raised earlier, is that we have individuals working from home. When you work from home, you use freedom to make trips during the midday. We're also seeing an increase of service vehicles that are bringing whatever we're purchasing online, maintenance of our lawns, and of course, any sort of support services. So it's a combination of things. It's not the fact that the traffic study being done was poorly done, or it's not projecting those impacts, or anything like that. It's a variety of different issues that is causing congestion. And those improvements are going in. We've heard this phrase many times. If you increase capacity of a roadway, I said this earlier, you're going to bring more traffic through that. Traffic is just like water. It's going to take the path of least resistance. Every person in here has a phone. I guarantee it. Probably, I can't say 100% of you, probably check that phone before you go anywhere. What's the fastest route? And so when you begin to route yourself to the fastest route, that's what happens. Everyone's routing to that fastest route. And so and while it is artificial intelligence and it does learn, it's putting people in those places. So I don't think there's a singular element that's causing that. I don't think that it's poor planning. I don't think that it's necessarily concentration growth in a single location. I think it's a factor of a lot of things that are influencing that.
If I can very briefly add to that, I would say we've had discussions about the MPO level, and I think one of the ways we would approach it is, when the developer has a tag, they're going to say, what's my proportional impact of a larger network? Well, what can I reasonably be expected to contribute to correcting? And you get that in an area that's growing dramatically, like we are. And you begin to see a corridor transition. You have to have in place a set of projects and a mechanism for them to contribute money to project priorities that are needed to address what's happening in that corridor. Because what the developer will say, and with some defense is, I'm not the bad guy. Yes, I've come in for business opportunity. I think I made a contribution. I'm not 100% responsible for what's happening on the corridor. And he or she is right. The question is, you've got to incrementally collect money from everyone who develops along that corridor. You've got to have an established process. And if it gets in the weeds a little bit, but you've got to have projects beforehand, which can be a little bit of a challenge. If you just start collecting money without a specified list of projects, some view that as a slush fund, if you will, and the potential for abuse. So you can't address it. It's a harder threshold to cross, but I think if we're being honest, and those of us who've been in the area for some time, most would agree, the easiest decisions of widening roads are behind us. It is the harder decisions that are ahead of us. And I think that's probably relevant too.
Very good answer. Funding, so the increase in gas taxes provided SCDOT additional money that will be used across the state for addressing infrastructure needs. How is SCDOT and RFATS preparing for rise in electric vehicle adoption across the state? How do you see that affecting the ability to invest in collection revenues going forward? So we have money to fund these projects.
Right now, the SCDOT is working on its plan based on the latest federal transportation bill of how we're going to address electric vehicles, mainly along our interstate corridors. And so that's our first round, is to develop that plan. What can we do, especially in rural areas with the separation of interchanges and so forth? How will we make facilities available with increasing sales of electric vehicles or other alternative vehicles? To make sure that they can be fueled regularly or sufficiently to make their trips. So we're in that first phase of developing that plan, and then based on the additional guidance from federal highways, we'll know what that next step is in terms of from the plan to actually implementing some of the ideas. Now that plan development, that plan includes a great deal of coordination with the industry partners, such as some of your larger providers, such as Tesla and some of the others. And so it's been a great collaboration, and it's a pretty good in terms of sizable effort to make sure that we can get it done, especially with power companies, how it taxes that grid and so forth. So there are a lot of things that we're looking into for that.
I would just quickly add, one of the things that we're dealing with at the MPO level is building off of what the state is doing and make that connection between rural and urban and using the I-77 corridor as that central corridor. One of the things that we do at RFATS is we work with all of our counterpart agencies in North Carolina, in Charlotte, Jacksonville, Lincoln, the various Orlando, what's called the Connected Autonomous Vehicle Task Force, because there's a lot of talk. And this is still an evolving subject, and everything is not known at this point. One of the challenges we have is, we're talking about growth here tonight, we're being asked, the planning agencies and state DOTs, to plan for current challenges Well, we've got an evolving technology concurrently developing at the same time. And in trying to balance that and move both things at the same time is a challenge. So I think we're targeting it right now. Let's get the initial corridor along I-77, build up demand and utilization there, and then we'll keep tracking developments in the field with our partners.
Great. We'll do one more question for the panel and then move on to audience questions. With SCDOT's complete streets policy, how do you see this impacting project development, prioritization, and implementation, and how will it impact you as I 21 assuming that goes forward?
I think one of the important things that I take from the regional mobility program is that it's changing the focus from being project specific to being corridor specific. You know, for the last couple of years, New York County was project specific. Build this new road, widen this one section, and they've done all that over the last 2 decades. The challenge is we're growing as rapidly as you are within the Panhandle. If you take a project-specific approach, you're likely to push the problem down the corridor. And so I think what the regional mobility program is doing is saying, we're going to rank corridors. And when you look at widening 521, we also want to make sure we're looking at non-vehicular movement. So what are we doing with sidewalks? How are you preserving the options for greater incorporation of public transit in the future? Are you approaching this in a multi-layered way, recognizing that it's not just vehicles that you're planning for, it's all users of the transportation system, not just now, but over the next couple of decades. So I see a lot of benefits from what Columbia is advancing.
And I'll speak to that in terms of complete streets that we can roll into the regional mobility that David just described. With our complete streets policy, again, we're looking at all modes of transportation. With that, our direction is more of an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in. So if we're developing a project, regardless of whether it's DOT, a CTC, or a local sales tax program, we must look at accommodations for other forms of transportation, such as bike ped. So right now, as we implement that with our resurfacing program, we're looking at all of those projects to say, where do we widen shoulders, for example, to provide those accommodations. In addition to that, as we look at projects, we're looking at, coordination with our MPOs as well as our COGS to identify transit stops. We're developing applications so that we can look at, is there connectivity? Can the motorist or the bicyclist or the pedestrian access those facilities? So we're taking a proactive approach now in projects, which is different than we may have been 10 years ago, because our focus was vehicular transportation. But today it's all modes of transportation. And as we roll that into our regional mobility program, we're looking at every form of transportation. And as we identify those corridors and evaluate those corridors, the next step where we currently are with the pilot that we actually have with RFATS is coordinating with them to say, this is what we found in terms of corridors that are in need based on data. We're trying to be data-driven, more objective in our project selection so that we can be good stewards with the, again, finite amount of funding that we have. And then we're coordinating with our MPOs and COGS to say, review this. You are present, you are in the area. Does this line up with what you see from day to day? And we've gotten those comments back from them. Right now, where we are today is we have a consultant reviewing those corridors. And so the next step is, what are the mitigation strategies? Because again, we can't keep widening. We've widened ourselves out of space. What are those low-hanging fruit? Where can we stop? We can start from the bottom and work ourselves up to say, what kind of strategies can we use to address congestion, to address safety, reliability, land use planning, and so forth. We have 6 elements that we look at. And then develop those programs based on that. The funding allocation is given to the MPOs and COGS. Then they will develop those sub-programs. I heard people mention intersections. He may have an intersection program. We may have an alternative transportation program, which would include walking, biking, and so forth. Do we have facilities that connect these bus stops so that people aren't walking on narrow shoulders that could be dangerous? So that's how we're tying in complete streets with regional mobility to address all modes of transportation and really looking to hear from the MPOs and COGs in terms of need. And that's where we need our local jurisdictions or the member jurisdictions to coordinate whatever your plan is, whatever it is, your final product with your comprehensive plan. Work directly with your MPOs and COGs because that's how DOT receives that information. That's how we're able to determine how we are looking at how we assign funding and resources to deliver projects on a local level, meaning an MPO COG level as well as a statewide level.
Actually, so we will take audience questions now, but if you would please come up to the microphone so that everyone can hear your question.
Hello, you've done a pretty good job of going over 521, but I'd like to talk about a story that happened a long time ago, where some local planners decided it would be a really good idea to be able to have a connector between 521 and Wig, the town. So they developed this 2-lane road that goes from 521, it's called Van Wyck Road. Since then, they've developed Sun City, and the back end of Sun City empties onto Van Wyck. There has been Treetops, which is 800 homes, just over 800 homes. It empties onto Van Wyck. There's a huge apartment complex on the corner of 521 and Van Wyck that now will enter and empty onto Van Wyck. There is 200 plus homes that's been approved on Griffin Road, which is going to empty onto Van Wyck. And in addition to that, they luckily voted down, the county did, 1,000 plus homes down the way, but it's still zoned for 1 acre lots, and there's 700 acres there, which will empty onto Van Wyck. The question I have is, at what point does it trigger the developer to kick in monies to improve the infrastructure, not only widening the lanes to 4 maybe, but also to bury the utilities, because every time we have a windstorm, we get power outages. They need to bury the utilities too. But the point is, I want to know is when do they start kicking in the developers to increase the infrastructure that we're facing? Because we have problems.
Well, I think this kind of is something that I spoke to a little earlier, and that is a study of local jurisdiction that grants development approval of prioritizing projects on those 2 corridors where they see that development pressure. If you look at the map, you've got Meadow Road, you've got all the undeveloped tracks. You know it's not it, it's just a matter of timing. When is it going to happen? And asking some of those questions proactively. I've got a term we call preventative land use planning, so that you don't just put your hands in and say there isn't enough money. You're asking some questions before you say yes to a new development, not after. That's one way to try to approach it. Where that hasn't happened, and it's not just in this county, I see it in New York as well, and I get people who say to me, and very candidly, they say, we just never thought it would take off like this. Okay, that's honest.
I guess the question is, are the developers required to do traffic mitigation studies, and at what point does it trigger their involvement?
Yes, they are. There's thresholds that are required by the state, by the county, for which traffic study would be required. It's usually around 150 trips, which doesn't take a lot of development to trigger a traffic study. I think, so one of my capacities, I serve as a town engineer, and I have to review a lot of traffic studies, and I have to help them talk to councils about this. And there's a community in North Carolina who was dealing with the same questions. Community outside of the metropolitan area, and they're requiring traffic studies, they're seeing development occur, seeing congestion still. And the council started asking questions, when do we start to widen roads? And so one of the things that we did for that was we started doing an analysis for each of the developments and looking at the capacity of those roadways. And when it reaches a certain threshold, that then becomes a condition of the development. Now, you can't ask a developer to go out and widen 5. That it doesn't connect. I know you're not asking that. The reasonableness of it is, and I think where we have to get to a point, and David mentioned this a minute ago, it's the power of the collective. And so if you have all of those developments that are there, if each development then puts money towards something, it allows for that collective money to be leveraged to do that. And so that's where we need to get to a point where we have that ability to do that. And so
I'd say one other thing just to follow up there, say, the proper planning, I was the proper planning. Some questions were asked beforehand, they didn't see the degree of the change, and that happens sometimes. It does happen. One of the things that could be an alternative is for the next local option sales tax, prioritize addressing this road as a potential project. Take a hard look at it. Make a case for it so you're not waiting on federal or state requirements where it meets a certain threshold. That can be advanced locally, and sometimes that is done. That's not the easiest process, but it is one option that I used to use.
One of the things that we've discussed internally at DOT, because growth is inevitable in certain areas, and it's happening so quickly till, it's hard to keep up. So if we see that there are larger tracts of land, and we may expect, in the next several years, the discussion is going to access management plans. And so we need that support on the local level to say that if we anticipate that there's going to be growth, maybe we look at access management where then the developer has to decide which tracts they buy or purchase or develop, and then know that access is going to be controlled onto our main line. And that's going to help with congestion as well, but it's going to be, it's a change of dynamic, it's a change of culture and mindset when we look at growth and development.
Good evening, thank you for everything. Obviously, there's a very big disconnect between all of you. I'm sorry. Obviously, there's let me start again, thank you very much for this evening. But obviously, there's a very big disconnect between your hard work and the local municipalities. And as the gentleman was just talking about Van Lack, you also look at right behind us. There's 500 or 600 houses plus retail going in. Go down to Shelley Mullis, there's another 500 or 600 houses and retail going in. And there is no way 521 can handle that. Period. If, ands, buts, or maybes. And so you guys can come up here and come up with all this wonderful theory, but it's not getting down to the municipalities that are owning and controlling these areas. And frankly, why bother? If you guys can't have the power to say to a county in this state that, gee whiz, before you let 1,200, 1,500 new houses plus retail come in, we have to do this, that, and the other thing to the existing infrastructure, it's just a waste of time and money, which is really a tragedy. That's what it's come down to. That's basically what you're saying. By the time you get down to 10 years, it's beyond this.
I hear your passion and respect, but one thing I would say, one of the reasons MPOs or state DOTs don't have the ability to compel a city, town, or county to do something or not do something is because that council is elected and accountable to local citizens in that area to make that very argument. It's not our place to come in and tell town A, you will do X. They have final authority and autonomy based upon the consent of their own citizens. So I do hear you, but a lot of that vision of either wanting to grow or not wanting to grow, or just slow growth down, is a function of a process like this, a comprehensive plan, and letting some of your area elected officials know what you think. I don't mean to push it back at you, but in this respect, I have to kind of go back and say, those who empower the council are the ones that drive the process.
Area that plan. We have to
Okay. Thank you. All right, y'all can hear me? Okay. The gentleman in the khaki trousers, your comment that yes, we find that the path of least resistance with traffic is incredibly true. With where we are located in the Panhandle, we bring a lot of traffic from North Carolina into Indian Land, drive up 521 either to Valentine or cut over 160 to get out to 77. How can we encourage them to widen Providence Road, which has been talked about for ages and isn't being done? And second of all, if we can't do that, can we just cancel this plan and put in potholes so they don't come this way?
Work.
It's a good question, right? Your geography, it's a blessing and a curse, right? You're very close to Charlotte. You got wonderful land here. You got natural resource to you, the top of the river, which prohibits that ability to come right across and connect to 77, which would alleviate some of the congestion because it's just 521. There's been a lot of discussion about Providence Road. There's been a lot of discussion about 74. There's been Road. There's 485 improvements, and all of those are moving forward. They're all moving forward, and then SCDOT ran into a funding crisis, and they have slowed everything down. That is starting to pick back up. And when those projects do come online, I think you're going to see a shift of traffic. Maybe it's minimal, maybe it's measurable. It's hard to say. But you're going to see those improvements that are going to happen. 16 is going to be wide all the way from Waxhaw all the way up to 45 and forward. That is moving forward. The design plans are being developed now. So it is happening. Is it at the pace any of us want? No. It's unfortunate. I wish I could do that and make it solved. But it is working. We are trying to solve that. It is trying to move forward and help alleviate that congestion.
Some of my questions were answered by the previous people, but it sounds like we're playing catch up here all the time. That the planning, unfortunately, there's nobody here from Lancaster County to be able to answer to why. Sorry. Oh.
I'm a customer for District 1.
Yeah. Okay, Terry. Yeah. Well, oh, and I know that. And part of the problem is that our representation up here in the Panhandle is limited because the census numbers that they're using for our participation or representation are so old. And I think some of the problems also for some of the development approvals, et cetera, and the planning going on here. You keep talking about 2017. Well, in that short of a period of time, that 5 years period of time, the amount of influx of building and population and the stress on the infrastructure, not just the roads, but other things. I know we're talking about transportation here, is just incredible. You're talking about another 90% increase on top of that. I mean, are we even going to be close to being able to get something in place, even by 2040, which God forbid, if I'm still alive to see it, I'll be impressed. But, I mean, seriously, is there even a plan for some kind of public transportation, like express buses or something? I haven't heard a peep about that. You talk about walking. Oh my God, if you try to walk around here and you talk about shoulders on the road for bicyclists, there's no such thing. Shelley Mullis, Henry Harris. I mean, none of those little feeder roads that are now having massive development go on top of them. I mean, it's a wonderful place to come and live. I'm not a native of this state, but I came here because I thought this would be a great place to, to live while I'm retired. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people here that felt the same way. And yes, it's wonderful that the state is seeing development and bringing people here and having, industry come, but there's a price to be paid. And we are paying it here, up in this area, because we are in such a great place. So it's just one, is there any alternatives, such as a bypass like they did for Fort Mill? Not that I can even see where you can get the land for it anymore because it's all been sold off. But, you know, what about public transportation?
Yes.
Great question, and I briefly addressed this when I began, so a lot of the stuff you're going to see tonight is going to be a foundation for what we're going to develop. So Peterson will be one of the alternatives that is put forward with this. What does it look like? Is it express bus service? Is it local circulator? Where are those locations? Where does it make sense? How far does it go down? And then tying that in, because it's not just providing the service, it's also how to connect to the other networks. So your bicycle, your pedestrian, your motor vehicle, is there a park and ride facility? All of that stuff is going to be addressed as we begin to move forward with recommendations. We're not at that point. We're still part of the discovery phase at this point. We're listening. Relative to your other point, as far as the affordable southern bypass, if there's some sort of connection out there, potentially, you'd be surprised that there is a lot of development here. There's a lot of environmental constraints. You've got a very rolling topography, I think is the best way to put it. And so that can be challenging for connecting roads. You've got a lot of streams that feed into the top of the river. You've got a lot of wetlands in this area, especially as you get south and towards Waxhaw connector that goes in there at 75. All that area is beautiful, but it's all wet. And so building in that makes it very difficult for our roadway. I have seen some plans that we've been working on that there are some collector streets that I think we can fit in. There are some connectors. What it takes, though, is it takes backbone to see those projects push forward. It might mean that we impact things that are near you, but you have to look at it from the standpoint of trying to make a connection that's going to provide connectivity that might alleviate congestion. And so that's the only thing that I'll offer. It is coming. I know that will be a part of future events that we'll have where we can share that and be able to talk about that in greater detail.
This is about 521. I understand there's budgeting problems, state and federal requirements, a lot of questions to be answered before it started, but is there any approximate start date for the construction of the enlargement? You know, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? It would be helpful for us to have at least something to look forward to.
That's a very good question. There's a couple of variables out there that influence this process. One is the folks from North Carolina are going to do their work. The other is completing the alternatives and then ranking. One thing that is good, that is in your favor, is that the adjusted approach to ranking that Michelle and Christina spoke about. When they look at different corridors, I gave them 15 of the most, the strongest and highest level corridors, and 521 ranked number 1. That matters. In our process, in your opportunity, that matters. Now, the county's already raised money for the last time we looked at the sales tax program. We're watching in RFATS to see what the price level comes in at. To see whether this is something we can do, perhaps there's 2 agencies, whether we have to make an application to state infrastructure bank, whether we need to have an application with the federal, perhaps in grant or comparable source, depending on where that price tag comes in. So I'm reluctant to give you a time frame because there are people who make decisions based on comments that we make. So we also have to be circumspect in what we say. I would tell you that, having said all that, between 4 and 5 years is not unreasonable. I'd like to tell you it'll be tomorrow, but I don't want to give you that impression. It could be sooner than that. One of the things we're waiting on is the release and updating after the 2020 census. They're going to release what are called designated urbanized areas in December. Within the next year, the MPOs will make adjustments to boundaries, and the state DOTs, now figure out that, will look at how they can increase funding. So that's contextualizing this a little bit as well. We don't know what the degree of increase will be. I will tell you, after 2010, it was substantial. Our annual amount went up 80%. I don't know that that'll happen again, given the increases that the state has already sought and secured from their government board. But there are a lot of variables out there that keep driving this process. So I can't give you any more specific than that, unfortunately.
Question on safety. Has there been any studies in previous roads that were widened from 4 to 6 lanes, and how did the accidents rise or fall, the amount of accidents? Because I feel like with 3 lanes, you have people that like to merge in and out.
Sure, that's a good question. There's been lots of documented studies that are out there that talk about that. The degree of separation that makes a difference on that is 300 intersections, and is it a 6-lane divided versus a 7-lane facility? That's the big key. Unfortunately, SCDOT's policy is you cannot build a 7-lane divided facility. It has to be median divided. That helps with reducing collisions, reducing accidents. The treatment of intersections is going to be critical for that. That's part of the reason that David in his study is looking at reduced conflict intersection, RCIs. That's essentially getting at taking away the potential for movements that can interact with each other to make it much safer. You mentioned a 20% increase in what you will in capacity. So same road pushing 20% more. And to save you from the boredom of really how that works, I have to talk about it later, and like really how all that happens. I'll get into the details. But what we see from the safety point when you go with an RCI is you see a dramatic decrease in incidents that occur on the roadway. So coupling the two together, you should see a facility that's going to flow traffic better and much safer rate.
Most of the questions have been asked by other people, but this is more of an observation. Living in Lancaster County, and it's been touched on a little bit, I'm just really disappointed that this seems to be all state of South Carolina. I feel like you've heard more about Fort Mill and that area, that's York County, it's not even Lancaster County. I'm really disappointed that I don't feel like the county is very well represented at this forum. Just my feeling based on what's been said. And I get that 521 is an issue, but people talk about Manwack and the issues that were coming up on there. I mean, it's a 2-line country road, but I'm just really disappointed that I feel like there should be somebody directly from Lancaster County that should be representing Lancaster County. This is the Lancaster 2040 UDO process.
Thank you, Terry. We do appreciate the representation. Lancaster County organized this forum and actually asked these experts in transportation to speak to these topics. So this is a Lancaster County forum, and we are here and we are interested in this feedback.
I think we have some time to answer this. This is our last question.
Thank you all for coming, especially for the SCDOT people to come. This is the first time that I've seen, and I've gone to a lot of county council meetings. We need to develop a much better relationship with the SCDOT because of our super growth here. I believe that Lancaster County voters are very invested in this process because we have passed a tax on our people, and I believe it's around $12 million that we've invested for this study. I would like to see something happen before 4 to 5 years because of that. And speaking of, I have to rub this in a little bit, RFATS. We do have a bridge to nowhere, real close to us, thanks to Mr. David Tepper and the Panthers, that a lot of money was spent on an intersection that came through very fast to the state of South Carolina. Environmental studies, whatever, got passed over. That money could have easily been used by RFATS in the state for projects that would affect a lot more people.
I do hear your point. I think not only work, some people say it's a bridge to nowhere. In actuality, I would take on that. When you build that kind of an infrastructure improvement, you put in a bit of change, it will be fully utilized. No one is going to allow us for that to be operational. That's actively being marketed for another development regional as we speak. It's only a matter of time before that actually happens. And it's not just the economic cost in that area. There'll be economic spillover benefits for other people who want to taste that development regional impact. So a little bit of a positive spillover right now. It's not apparent now. It's not being discussed now. But it's more than just a disagreement among the developer and the jurisdictions a little bit more involved there. I think Washington and the state DOTs always look at MPOs. If you start spending federal money, if you don't complete that project, you are required to pay it back. So you do have to complete it. It's a new interchange. I hear your frustration. I'm not getting into the wisdom of whether the money should have been used. I'm just saying the improvement is done. It is being marketed. It will be fully utilized over time.
Yes, I'm a resident of Sun City. I know there's other residents here. We're very concerned about the new Vantage apartments being built. There's 294 units there. We're concerned that all of that egress and entrance is going to funnel them on Van Wyck Road. And that, for those people and the existing people that use Van Wyck Road are not going to be able to make a left-hand turn. Therefore, some people are going to start saying, hey, let's take a right-hand turn and go through Sun City. That's wrong. I've asked for the traffic analysis. I have it here. It's a lengthy document, but it's a little flawed in that it doesn't show the impact of the existing flow on Van Wyck. Therefore, I think we need to really consider additional widening of Van Wyck to encompass the two access points of Vantage, and then allow more traffic flow to take left-hand turn. That's not in this report. Now, Mr. Hooper, you mentioned about the developer putting money in the pot, so to speak. How do we do that? Here's an opportunity to actually use that. So I don't know how we pass that along.
I'd say I have to refer to the local jurisdiction, Lancaster County. They have to reach an agreement with the state. They've got to go through and develop a slate of projects, and then they've got to be collecting that money. That's not something that occurs at the MPO level. That occurs at the jurisdictional level. But if the planning record is here, I'm sure you can follow those appropriately on that.
I have just one quick question. I represent 296 homeowners over here in Hanover Townhome Community. We are landlocked. We have no entrance except to come and go on 521. So if you're going to expand it to 6 lanes, how do you take into consideration a small community like ours?
It's one of the things that I think we do whenever you have widening is you look at what's feasible, whether it will objectively move the needle, whether things will get better, and what is the expected outcome or the length of the expected useful life of making that kind of improvement. Now, there's other things beyond just the widening that are relevant here. There are things like access management, or number of driveways, their spacing, placing signals, and other things that are complements to a widening project. It's not just the widening per se. So I think there's more to it than just looking for the widening to do that. That's not really the objective. I think, in answer to your question, there's follow-up that can go on between the MPO, the state DOT, depending on the roads involved, and the local jurisdiction to look at, candidly, why there's one exit and entry point, why there's not 2 or more. If there's some unique characteristics and the basis of that original development approval, whether you got 4 lanes out there or 6.
All right. That's going to bring us to the end of our time here this evening. You've been very patient. Thank you all for patiently waiting to ask questions at the end there. On the screen, we do have the website. If you're interested in learning more about the process, you can go to AICP.com. All the presentations and videos of each of the forums are posted on there. It will be posted on there once we get a chance to process this. And there's a place you can sign up for email notifications of upcoming future public events that we'll be having during the process, just updates on the process in general. Thank you all again for coming out this evening, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.